A call at 2:17 a.m. left a deep cut in me, one that I may never heal from in this lifetime. The shrill ring of the phone shattered the gentle rain of a San Francisco night, waking me with a clear premonition that something was terribly wrong. Claire, the voice of a boy who should have been asleep, hesitated. "It's Mason. Mom told me to call. Dad's at Boston General. I don't know anything else." I sat up as if someone had stabbed a knife straight into my chest. Only one thought filled my mind: get there now. 3 hours later, I stood in the lobby of Boston General Hospital with a small suitcase still carrying the scent of tears from the airplane seat. My heart pounded like a war drum. The last time I spoke to my father was 2 weeks ago. I wished him a good evening and asked if Lily had taken her piano exam. He laughed, promising to tell me all about it next time. Then the call ended. Now, as I passed the receptionist and gave my father's name, Jonathan Anderson, Cardiology, all I wanted was to be by his side, even for just a minute. Ms. Anderson, the nurse, responded, her actions hesitant. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Anderson's medical guardian has specified that only immediate family living with him can visit. I'm his biological daughter." "I know. But this decision was made by the patient's legal representative. Unfortunately, it's his current wife." I was pushed out, met by the cold stone-like eyes of Vivian Cross staring at me from the end of the hallway. She wore a pristine black dress, her hair neatly pinned up, as if she were attending a funeral. "Claire, you're too late," she said calmly. "He's resting. Go home and wait for updates from the hospital." I froze, standing in the lobby, that felt as heavy as a funeral parlor. My eyes held nothing but pain. If you've ever been excluded from your own family, or denied the chance to say goodbye to someone you love most, please leave a comment. I've been there, and I know you're not alone. My name is Claire Anderson. I'm 29, living in San Francisco, working at a marketing firm. I love late-night coffee walks by the bay when I'm stressed, and sometimes rereading the letters my mother wrote when she was still alive. My mother passed away when I was 13 from breast cancer. My father was my only companion for the rest of my life after that. He was a businessman, but never let work overshadow family. Sundays were sacred. We'd row on the Hudson River, stop at a bakery for apple pie and sip hot chocolate. He'd say your mother was the only one who made me feel like I could truly come home. Then he remarried. I didn't object. I wanted him to be happy. Vivian Cross entered like a fairy tale queen, beautiful, charming, and impossibly perfect. She had 2 children, Nathan 13 and Lily 11. Both were eerily well-mannered. I tried to befriend them, but Vivian's cold demeanor when my father wasn't looking made it clear there was no place for me in this family. Back at the hospital, I was frantically calling anyone who could help. Walter Bennett, my father's longtime lawyer friend, was out of town. Eleanor, his former assistant, had been fired during a staff reorganization. No one was left to say, "This is his real daughter." I sat in the lobby for 4 hours. Every nurse's announcement made my heart explode. Every child passing by with a stuffed animal reminded me of the times my father carried me on his shoulders, singing, "You are my sunshine." But now in the cold hallway under pale green lights, I was alone. No one called my name, no one took me to his side. On the second night, I fell asleep in the hospital cafeteria. Near dawn, a young nurse gently shook me awake. She leaned in and whispered, "Are you Claire Anderson?" I nodded. "Your father was awake briefly. Yesterday he asked for you, but what the medical guardian didn't allow contact." "I'm so sorry." I broke down. The tears I'd held back for 48 hours finally spilled. I wasn't crying because I was barred. I cried because he'd asked for me. He remembered. He was waiting. The next morning my phone buzzed. I didn't want to answer, but picked it up anyway. "Ms. Claire Anderson." "Yes, this is Dr. Kaplan. I'm so sorry. Your father passed away at 5:12 a.m. We did everything we could." All sound vanished. The world went silent as if someone had unplugged life itself. I didn't get to hold his hand. I didn't get to say I loved him. I didn't get to catch his final gaze. I didn't get to be his daughter one last time. The funeral was held at the city's most luxurious funeral home, not the small church where my mother had been laid to rest. I was seated in the back row like a stranger. In her eulogy, Vivian said Jonathan was the light of my life. He gave me and my children a new family. Not once did she mention me. When it was time to view my father one last time, I stepped forward. A man stopped me. Family only. I'm his daughter. Your name isn't on the list. I caught only a glimpse of his silver hair, his clenched hands before the coffin lid slammed shut. That night I returned to my hotel, kicked off my shoes, and sat alone in the dark. Not because my feet hurt, but because the world had rejected me. I lost my father. I lost my family, and I didn't understand why things had turned out this way. But I knew one thing: I wouldn't let my father go in this silence. I would uncover everything, even if it meant facing the world. If you've ever suspected something was wrong, but no one believed you, leave a period in the comments. You're not alone. I once believed some memories would remain untouched, like a film reel stored in a safe box, untouchable by anyone. But one day you open that box and realize most of it has faded. Not because of time, but because you were forced to doubt yourself. Hudson, New York. The small town where I grew up, just 2.5 hours from New York City. A place where the river bearing its name flows quietly through grassy slopes, and the sky always feels like an open embrace. Our house sat on a gentle hill, painted white with black shingles, a low wooden fence, and a small garden full of lavender. It wasn't luxurious or expensive, but it was my world. My mother, Julia Anderson, had a voice soft as velvet and left a faint vanilla scent in every corner of the house. She taught me to write letters by hand, to read books aloud, to listen instead of just responding. My father, Jonathan, had a kind smile and the eyes of a seasoned man who always made you feel like the center of the universe. When they were together, I thought nothing could break us. But cancer doesn't need a reason. My mother passed when I was 13. On a drizzly October morning, I sat in her hospital room, watching my father hold her frail, cold body, not understanding why he didn't say a word. From that day, he became both father and mother. He learned to braid my hair clumsily. He mastered burnt-edge pancakes, bought sanitary pads without blushing, and comforted a teenage girl with a void no one could fill. Every Sunday we kept our rowing tradition. Only now my mother wasn't on the shore waving. On winter mornings he made hot chocolate like she used to. For every birthday he wrote a card in her place. The familiar words, "You are the light in my darkest days." Once I asked why he didn't remarry. He said my mother was the only one who made him feel like himself, without hiding anything. I believed him. Until I was 19. I was a freshman in communications in San Francisco. When he called one evening, "Claire, I met a woman. She's interesting. A widow. 2 kids. She's been through loss like us." I paused for a few seconds, then said sincerely, "If you're ready, Dad, so am I." "Thank you," he said. "I wanted you to be the first to know." I met Vivian Cross at a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan. I arrived early, adjusting my collar, repeatedly telling myself not to judge too soon. But when she walked in with her 2 children, Nathan and Lily, I knew instinctively something was off. Vivian was beautiful in a cold, polished way that made it hard to look at her for long. Her smile seemed rehearsed. Her perfume was strong, and her glance at me brief but unmistakably icy. "Claire, your father talks about you a lot," she said, extending a hand. Cold, crimson nails. Lily smiled, a too perfect smile for an 11-year-old. Nathan just nodded. Dinner passed in awkwardness. I talked about school. Vivian spoke of private school's interior design and the new life my father had given them. My father smiled throughout his eyes like he'd found a new spring. I ate my pasta without tasting it. 6 months later, they married. The wedding was in our backyard. No, their backyard now. I wore a pale green dress standing by my father. As he held my hand, he whispered, "I know things are moving fast, but trust me, Vivian is good." I nodded. I truly wanted to believe him. But things changed the moment I returned home for winter break. My mother's photo, the one of her in a straw hat by the lake, was gone from the fireplace. I found it in a low drawer face down. The crystal vase from my grandmother used for flowers every Thanksgiving was replaced by Nordic-style gray candles. When I asked, Vivian just smiled. "We need a fresh space. Every new beginning needs a bright feel-right." Richard, my father, gave an awkward smile, saying nothing. Breakfast was no longer me and Dad reading the paper together. Now it was a family affair, Vivian dictating the menu, Lily choosing music, Nathan sitting by Dad like a stand-in. I didn't hate them, but I felt like an old piece of furniture valuable in the past, but out of place in the current aesthetic. One night, washing dishes with Dad, I whispered, "Do I seem out of place to you?" He set the plate down, looking at me. "Vivian's trying. They need time to get used to you." I nodded, still wanting to believe. But a storm was brewing in my heart. If you've ever lived in your own home but felt like a guest, leave one word, isolated, I know that feeling better than anyone. At the end of the break, I sat by the Hudson River where Dad and I used to row. Across the water, Lily was laughing, her voice mingling with Vivian's from the backyard. I hugged my cold, hot chocolate, watching the river flow, and wondered, did I just lose my father without anyone warning me? I didn't know that loss was only the beginning. Everything I believed in, everything I cherished, was slowly being replaced. Some changes come like dust you don't notice until you touch a familiar shelf and find it coated, covering what was once yours. The first time I returned home after the wedding was during spring break of my sophomore year. The snow hadn't fully melted, the sky was gray, but I carried hope that things would be okay, that I'd been overthinking. The white wooden door was still there, the steps still cracked from a tree root, but last year's Christmas wreath was replaced by a Nordic-style cloud white one, as if the house was trying to become a magazine spread instead of a home. I set my suitcase by the staircase. Dad came out of the kitchen beaming, "Claire, you're back." I ran to hug him. For a moment I was a kid again, lifted high when he came home from work. Then a voice came from behind Claire's here. "Let me help with your bags." Vivian, in a cream turtleneck hair, neatly pinned wine-red lipstick. I forced a smile. "Thanks, I can manage. Call me Vivian. We're family." I nodded, slightly looking around. My mother's oil painting on the staircase was gone, replaced by an expensive abstract piece, two gray shapes, no form, no emotion. In the days that followed, I tried to fit in. I took Lily book shopping, bought her a cat keychain, because she loved Harry Potter. She smiled, but glanced at her mother for approval before thanking me. Nathan barely spoke. I asked about school music friends. He answered politely, but never asked about me. One evening, washing dishes with Dad, I whispered, "Do I feel like an outsider to you?" He set the plate down, turning to me. "Claire, everyone's trying. Vivian, too. Give them time." I smiled faintly, nodding. But deep down I knew it wasn't patience fading. It was trust. Bit by bit, my mother's memories were replaced by Vivian's minimalist style, what she called space rebirth. The white porcelain teapot my mother used every morning sat dust-covered on a high shelf. The hand-embroidered napkins she made during chemo no longer appeared at Easter dinners. I asked once. Vivian smiled. "Old things can make people sad. I just want things lighter." Dad, as usual, didn't react. One morning I went to make coffee. The kitchen was occupied. Vivian arranging bread, Lily playing soft jazz, Nathan pouring orange juice. I stood there waiting for Dad. He came in smiling. "Claire, you're up, sit down." But his seat was taken. I poured my coffee, sat at the table's end. For the first time I understood what it felt like to be the fifth person at a 4-seat table. If you've ever been among your family yet felt lost, leave A in the comments. Sometimes you don't even recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. That evening, reading in my room, I heard Dad coughing violently from his room. I ran over, knocking Dad. "You okay?" He opened the door, sweat soaking his collar, eyes sunken. In his hand was an unmarked pill bottle. "I'm just tired." Vivian booked a doctor's visit. "Don't worry." I stepped closer, holding the bottle. The label was peeled off, the text faded. I asked, "What pills are these?" He snatched it back, whispering, "You don't need to worry. Vivian takes good care of me." I stepped back, stunned. Not because of the cough, but because of his eyes. They no longer held the clarity I knew. The day I left Hudson, light snow fell. I stood at the door, hugging Dad. "I'll be back for summer." "I'm looking forward to it." He said, his voice so soft I had to lean in to hear. In the car, I looked through the window. Lily was watering plants, Vivian directing the snow-clearing crew. Nathan stood on the step, watching me but not waving. I pulled out my phone, opened a photo of Mom. I whispered, "I'm scared, Mom." The man who was my fortress is slipping away. I didn't know that disappearance wasn't natural. It was orchestrated, calculated, and I, his only biological daughter, was being erased from his legacy in the subtlest ways. Sometimes silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the final, desperate signal before someone sinks into darkness. After that spring break, I returned to San Francisco, with a mind tangled like the lavender battered by wind on our porch. I started noticing small details. Things that once made me uneasy now had a named suspicion. I called Dad weekly as always, but his voice wasn't steady. Sometimes he spoke too fast, other times he drifted repeating things I'd said the day before. Once he called me Julia Mom's name. I laughed it off, pretending not to notice, but I knew it wasn't a harmless mistake. One Saturday afternoon, studying in the library, my phone buzzed. It was Vivian. "Claire, your father's resting. He's been tired lately. Don't call at this hour. It affects his sleep." I stayed calm. "Can I call in the evening then?" "Not advisable. He's forgetful, and calls keep him up. The doctor recommends quiet." I wanted to ask which doctor, but she hung up. After that, I tried calling at random times. Sometimes Vivian answered. Sometimes Nathan, who only said Mom doesn't let Dad use the phone much anymore. Once Dad answered, his voice a whisper like wind through a cracked door. "Claire, I miss you, but it's not easy now. You understand. What's wrong?" "Dad," a pause. Then he whispered, "If something happens, find Howard." "Howard who?" But he hung up. "Howard Blake." The name flashed in my mind like a shard of light in the chaos. I vaguely remembered him a lawyer who worked with Dad for years. A silver-haired man with a slow voice who called me the Anderson Princess when I was little. But why mention him, and why, in such a secretive whisper, I emailed Eleanor, Dad's former assistant. A week later she replied, "Howard Blake retired after your father remarried." No clear reason. No one replaced him. Most work was transferred to Harrison and Powell. A major, quiet change. As if Dad's familiar layers were being stripped away without a sound. If you've ever felt something was wrong, but no one believed you, leave a period in the comments. Sometimes a small sign is enough to start a big truth. At the end of the semester, I decided to return to Hudson unannounced. Early summer green leaves the garden fragrant with lavender. I walked in without ringing the bell. The TV echoed inside. Dad was on the sofa wrapped in a thin blanket, thinner than I remembered. Sunken eyes, bony hands on his chest. "Dad," he opened his eyes. For the first time in months, he looked at me without mixing up my name. "Claire, you're back." I sat beside him holding his hand. Next to him was a tray of pills, 8 colorful ones in a plastic case. No labels. I asked, "What are these pills?" "Dad," he shook his head. "Vivian handles it all." I looked around. Vivian was busy in the kitchen. I picked up a pill, but couldn't find a name. Dad whispered, "Sometimes my head feels like it's floating. I can't remember if I ate or took my pills." "Vivian says it's age." I squeezed his hand. "Do you believe that he didn't answer?" He just looked out the window where sunlight slanted through the leaves. That night I begged to sleep in the living room, claiming I didn't want to disturb anyone. At midnight I heard Dad shuffling to the kitchen. I followed. In the dim light he opened a drawer, slipped a small paper into his robe pocket. When he saw me, he froze, as if caught doing something wrong. "Claire, you need to be careful. I don't know who's right or wrong anymore. But not everything is for you." I asked, "What are you afraid of?" He gripped my hand, trembling. "Howard knows. If I'm gone, find him. He knows what I couldn't say." The next morning, Vivian handed Dad a strange green smoothie. "Time for your meds." I took the glass, smelling a sharp odor. When I asked what was in it, she smiled. "Just barley powder. You wouldn't be used to it." Her eyes slid over me like a blade. In that moment, I realized the man who was my greatest pillar was drowning in unnamed pills and hazy sleep. And he was crying for help, in the only language he had left silence. I returned to San Francisco days later with a resolve I'd never felt before. I would find Howard Blake. I would trace every memory Dad left behind, and I wouldn't let anyone extinguish the last thing he tried to preserve for me, the truth. Some deaths don't come with sobs or agonizing pain. Some deaths are quiet, like a leaf falling in the night unnoticed. And some people, though alive, are erased from the world of those they love. Like me. The call came on a cold, gray morning. I was working in my San Francisco office, fluorescent lights reflecting wearily on my computer screen when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a gut feeling pulled me from the keyboard. "Claire Anderson," a man's voice asked. "Yes, I'm listening. This is the head nurse at Boston General Hospital. I'm sorry to inform you, your father, Jonathan Anderson, passed away at 5:12 a.m. today." I froze. No warning, no final chance to say I loved him. No hand to hold. Not even a goodbye glance. I dropped the phone, my heart plunging into a darkness I'd never known. I called Vivian, my stepmother. No answer. I texted, no reply. Hours later, a curt message: "Funeral tomorrow, 10 a.m., Whitmore Funeral Home. Please be on time." No condolences. No explanation. Just a soulless summons. I flew to Boston that night. The taxi dropped me at the funeral home as fog lingered. People in black walked silently inside while I stood outside, heart-shattered. My father's funeral. The man who carried me along the Hudson River every autumn evening. Who sang, "You Are My Sunshine," when I had a fever. Who said I was the most precious thing in his life, and I wasn't allowed in the room where he took his last breath. I entered the funeral home. An attendant directed me to the back row. "I'm Jonathan's daughter," I said softly. "Sorry the seating was prearranged," he replied, avoiding my eyes. I sat, scanning the room. Vivian sat in the front, in an exquisite black dress, hair pinned high, face tinged with feigned sorrow. Beside her were Ethan and Chloe, people I once thought were family. In her eulogy, Vivian spoke of her beloved husband, the great stepfather to her children. She talked of cozy family nights, beach trips, love letters. Not once was my name mentioned. Not once. Not even he also had a daughter. When it was time to view the body, I stood. A man, Vivian's brother, blocked me. Only those on the family list can approach the coffin. I clenched my fists. I am his daughter. Your name isn't on the list. I only caught a glimpse of Dad's silver hair, his clasped hands. Cold. As if the final door had slammed shut before me forever. I left the funeral home in icy drizzle. No one saw me off. No one asked how I was. I was a shadow among people I once called family, or thought I did. That night in my small hotel room, I curled up clutching Dad's old jacket, still faintly scented with sandalwood. I didn't just lose my father. I lost my place in his life. Have you ever felt erased from your own family? Robbed of the chance to say one last, "I love you"? If so, leave it in the comments. Let me know I'm not alone. The next morning, I wandered to the old house. The white-painted house now had faint moss under the eaves. I stood silently at the gate, not daring to ring the bell. I didn't know if I still had a key to the past. But then I remembered something. The last night Dad called me into his study. He whispered in the dim light, "If something happens, find Howard." Howard, Howard Blake, the lawyer. The name flashed in my mind like lightning tearing through the night. Dad had left a final message, a last signal. I didn't know who Howard was, but I knew he was my only hope to uncover the truth Dad couldn't voice. And in his silent death, I understood one thing. The truth doesn't lie in tears. It lies in what no one dares mention. I still remember Dad's final look, quiet, distant, as if he knew something I couldn't yet grasp. His whispered words before we parted haunted me. If something happens, find Howard. No last name, no address, just a name so fragile it seemed hopeless. But to me, then, it was the only red thread to pull me from emptiness. I started searching. From faint memories of childhood company dinners, I recalled Howard Blake as Dad's longtime legal advisor, almost a friend. A reserved man in gray tweed and round glasses. Google offered little, but an old lawyer forum led me to a small office in Albany, New York. I drove 3 hours through spring rain to get there. The frosted glass door with Howard E. Blake, attorney at law, was unremarkable. I stepped in, my heart tightening. I'd like to see Mr. Blake. "I'm Claire Anderson." The receptionist hesitated, then went inside. Moments later, an older man appeared. I knew it was him without introduction. "I'm not taking new clients." "Sorry," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not here as a client. I'm Jonathan Anderson's daughter. Before he died, he told me to find you." He paused, his eyes flickering briefly, then regained their coolness. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I have nothing to offer. You should ask your family's current lawyer. Vivian chose him, not my father." He tightened his grip on his glasses eyes on the floor. "I can't help you, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't come back." I wasn't angry, just hollow. I nodded politely and left, but instinct told me he was hiding something. Not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid. 3 days later, I returned. Not inside, just watching from my car across the street. He arrived on time, carrying an old leather bag, stopping for coffee at the corner. I waited, again and again. On the 5th visit, I saw something that chilled me, a well-dressed woman, none other than Vivian, leaving Howard's office building. She didn't see me, but he did. Through the glass door, his eyes met mine, filled with guilt and worry. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I printed old articles and legal regulations. I found a clause: if a lawyer is accused of improperly disclosing information, they could lose their license. I understood. Vivian had threatened Howard, likely accusing him of wrongful interference in the will if he spoke. A threat both legal and terrifying for someone who lived by their reputation. I wrote a handwritten letter, slipped it into a brown envelope. "I don't want you to lose your practice. But if my father trusted you, so do I. If you've ever had a daughter, you'd understand why I can't give up. Claire." I slid it through his office door slot, my heart heavy. No expectations, just hope he'd understand. 4 days later, an anonymous package arrived at my hotel. Inside was a copy of the original will printed on Jonathan Anderson, confidential letterhead, and a small handwritten note: "Claire. The truth can't be locked away forever. You're not alone. H." My hands shook as I held the copy. It wasn't just legal proof, it was proof that Dad kept his word. He'd tried to fix his mistake, just didn't have time to tell me. I cried. For him. For Howard. For a truth I thought was lost. If someone has ever helped you silently despite fear because they believed you deserved it, leave A in the comments. Maybe people like Howard need no reward beyond a small light like that. When I reviewed the original will, I realized one thing: it didn't just change the law. It changed everything. And I knew I needed a new lawyer, one unafraid of the dark. I don't know what woke me that early morning. Maybe the soft patter of rain on the hotel window, or the vague unease that never left me since Dad's death. I was still in Boston, unwilling to leave, not because I needed more time, but because it didn't feel finished. Stepping out for coffee, I saw it. A brown envelope neatly placed at my door, no stamp, no sender's address. Just a handwritten line in blue ink: "To Claire Anderson. Personal." My hands went cold as I picked it up. Who knew I was here? Who left this without a sound, without warning? Back in my room, I set the envelope on the table, heart pounding. I took a deep breath and carefully tore the seal. Inside was a stack of papers in a clear plastic sleeve and a handwritten note, its slanted, bold but trembling script. "The truth cannot be locked away forever. You are not alone." I gripped the note, hands trembling slightly. Below it was a notarized copy of the will, not the one Vivian used at Harrison and Powell. This was the original. The one Dad mentioned. The one Howard Blake drafted and tried to keep silent. I flipped through the pages. Each word ignited memories. My name, Claire Anderson, appeared not just as part of the estate, but as the primary heir to all assets, the company and control of the trust Dad spent his life building. Vivian's name appeared only once, with a small portion for living expenses. No special provisions. Not a word granting her control. My heart tightened. This was proof. Undeniable. Dad had been lucid, had tried to protect me, had entrusted everything in this document before someone changed it all, and someone still believed I deserved it. I turned the note over. Nothing more. No name, no signature. Just those words like a whisper, a hand gently on my shoulder in the dark. You are not alone. If you've ever received something unexpected anonymous that made you feel seen on the right side, leave A in the comments. Maybe you and I have been saved by someone's silence. I gathered the papers, locked them in a document bag. I couldn't take risks. If someone was quiet enough to deliver this, they knew its value. Part of me wanted to call a lawyer immediately, but another part, I needed to verify first. I needed to be sure I wasn't clinging to fragile hope. I called Walter Bennett, Dad's old lawyer friend. When he heard my voice, he paused, then whispered, "So, it's time." I arranged to meet him the next morning at his old office by Hudson's Town Square. Driving there, I kept checking the rearview mirror as if the feeling of being watched was tangible. I didn't know if it was stress or something real moving in the shadows. Walter's office was unchanged, old-smelling of paper oak and light dust. When I placed the will on his desk, he knew within seconds. "This is the one I witnessed him sign," Walter said softly. "I'm no longer his legal representative, but I never signed another after this." I gripped my hands. "Can it stand in court?" He nodded. "With one condition, you need a lawyer bold enough to face Vivian." I gave a small smile, not entirely from joy. "Any recommendations?" He slid a business card toward me. Embossed name Caroline Morgan. Family law specializing in estate disputes. She's young, but fearless. I took the card, my eyes lingering on the tagline, "Trust isn't given, it's proven." I smiled for the first time in weeks. I had proof. I had a father, though, gone still on my side, and I had a stranger, or not so strange, brave enough to pass on the truth. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew this time I wasn't walking alone. They say the truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deeply buried. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but in the dim morning at First National Bank, I believed it completely. The small key taped to the end of Dad's letter, the one he told me to keep if anything happened, led me to a safe deposit box in the bank's basement, where pale yellow light filtered through thick dust. I sat at a cold steel table, hands trembling, as the clerk handed me a long gray metal box, heavier than I expected. They left me alone. When the lock clicked open, it felt like unlocking a piece of Dad's soul. Inside were 3 items. A beige envelope containing a small black USB drive, a thick file bound with gray twine, and a worn brown leather notebook with Dad's familiar handwriting. I opened the USB first, plugging it into my laptop. 4 audio files, each 5 to 10 minutes long. I pressed play. Dad's voice came through hoarse, slow. "If you're hearing this, it means I couldn't protect myself, but I can still protect you." I held my breath. He recounted everything, feeling foggy after taking pills, Vivian not letting him see a doctor alone, Eleanor, his old assistant, suddenly reassigned. He suspected Vivian was controlling his medication and isolating him from trusted people. I hired an expert to test my prescriptions. The results showed many doses were altered. Some weren't even officially documented. I moved to the second file. Dad spoke of a secret meeting with Howard Blake, who helped him redraft the will. Howard feared losing his license. Vivian threatened to sue him for misconduct, but he agreed to help. We redrafted the will not because I hated Vivian, but to ensure you weren't erased from my life. I paused to breathe. I'd never heard Dad so calm while speaking of fear. The third file was a recorded conversation between him and Vivian. How he managed to record it, I don't know. "Vivian, I'm only doing what's best for you, but you never trust me." "Dad, don't call it love when you're swapping my pills and keeping my daughter away." I opened the file. Inside were photos of Vivian meeting a man who looked like her ex-husband. Bank statements showing transfers from Dad's account to an overseas account under an unfamiliar name. Printed emails from a small suburban pharmacy noting changes to Dad's original prescriptions. But what brought me to tears was the notebook. Dad's handwritten entries, pages filled with smudged ink, Feb 14 dizzy after dinner. Can't recall what I said. Mar 28. Eleanor barred from the house. Reason unclear. Chloe told not to talk to Claire. May 2nd. Saw Vivian swap pill bottles, same exterior. Pills inside were different colors. I clutched the notebook to my chest as if holding Dad's trembling heart. Anger and helplessness swirled, but behind them was light. This was proof. No longer just suspicion. If your instincts ever told you something was wrong, but you had no proof you're not alone. Leave A in the comments if you've waited for the truth to emerge in silence. Leaving the bank, Boston's wind hit me hard, making me shiver. But this time, not from fear, because I held the final piece. That night, I called Caroline Lawson, the young lawyer Walter recommended. We met the next morning. I sent her all the copied documents and audio. "If what I'm seeing is real," Caroline said after nearly 2 hours of reading in silence, "this isn't just about a will. This is evidence of elder abuse and financial fraud. We have a major case." I nodded. Not for the money, but for honor. Dad's honor. My honor. Ending this chapter, I knew one thing when I walked into the will reading room. Soon I wouldn't come empty-handed. There was a strange silence in that luxurious room. Leather chairs, neatly aligned curtains drawn to keep the light neither too harsh nor too dim. But everything felt staged, as if preparing a theater, not an inheritance meeting. Vivian chose to hold Dad's will reading at Harrison's law office, one she hired unrelated to Dad's former firm. A choice that made me wary, and one that told me this was a performance I couldn't miss. I walked in quietly. Eyes turned to me as if I were a ghost from the past stepping through the door. "Claire, you're not on the guest list," a secretary whispered. I gave a faint smile untouched by the coldness. "But I'm in my father's final will," I replied, "and I'm here at the legal invitation of Walter Bennett." In that moment, the room's air seemed to freeze. Vivian, seated at the table's center in a sleek black dress, her face made up just enough to look like a grieving widow, stiffened when she saw me. Her eyes flashed surprise, then quickly shifted to caution. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice sharp and measured. "I am." A deep, male voice came from behind. Walter stepped in, carrying a dark leather briefcase, and beside him, Caroline Lawson, the young, fierce lawyer I'd entrusted with Dad's evidence. Caroline scanned the room, clear and precise. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the interruption. But before this will reading begins, I must present a legal document, the final lawful will of Jonathan Blake." Murmurs spread like wind through dry fields. I didn't turn or look down. I stepped to the table, pulling from my bag a crimson leather-bound file, the will notarized with Dad's signature, and 2 independent witnesses from Harrington and Cole. I placed it before Harrison, Vivian's lawyer. He glanced at it, brows furrowing. Vivian slammed her hand on the table. "This is a forgery," she snapped. Richard never mentioned changing the will. She's fabricating this." I said nothing, but Caroline spoke. "This will was drafted 6 months before Jonathan's death, fully notarized with 2 independent witnesses. It's registered with the Massachusetts probate office." Walter added, "And I was the one Jonathan contacted to find a neutral firm not tied to the family to draft the new will, because he suspected he was being controlled." A silent shockwave. I could feel Ethan's eyes on me, Chloe clutching her dress. Vivian stood. "I'll sue. This is a conspiracy. You're all frauds. She's exploiting a sick old man." Caroline pulled out the USB. "This is a recording from Jonathan himself left for his daughter. In it, he clearly states he suspected medical and legal manipulation and requested an investigation if anything unusual occurred in his death." I looked straight at Vivian, and he also said, "If something happens, find Howard. The lawyer you threatened, the one who drafted the original will." Silence returned, heavier this time. I didn't know what they were thinking, Harrison, Vivian, Ethan, or Chloe. But I knew one thing: I was no longer alone, and justice was being called by its rightful name. Caroline read the new will aloud, line by line. "All company shares, assets, house accounts transferred to me, Claire Blake, the legal heir. Vivian and her children received only a fixed trust, no interference, no control." Walter stood addressing Harrison. "I advise you to stop using the old will. Otherwise, a civil lawsuit begins tomorrow." No one spoke. Leaving the room, I didn't feel relief, just a calm I'd never known, as if the storm within me finally had a place to pass through. Have you ever had to prove what's right while the world called you wrong? Leva, if you know that feeling. I thought it was over, but checking my phone in the car, I saw an anonymous email with one line. "You think you've won?" I swallowed a sigh. This battle clearly wasn't over. The microphone before me was cold and slick, like a freshly healed wound. The auditorium fell silent, camera flashes pulsing like the chaotic heartbeat in my chest. I stood there not as an heir who'd won a legal battle, but as a daughter of my father, of the truth, and of what he left behind, honor and a life for what's right. I'm not here to claim victory, I began, my voice clear through the speakers. I'm here to keep a promise to my father. He didn't teach me to seek revenge. He taught me to preserve the value of kindness. And I choose to do that in my own way. On the table before me was the public declaration of the estate I'd fully inherited: Thompson Development, the Hudson House Investments bank accounts, and shares in East Coast real estate projects. I looked up straight into the live broadcast camera. I'm establishing the Richard Thompson Scholarship Fund for children who've faced loss like I lost my mother, and the first 2 nominees are Nathan and Lily Cross. A small ripple of murmurs rose, then faded. I paused, but with one condition. I saw Vivian's face seated in the back frieze. If Nathan and Lily choose to live up to the legacy my father left, honor, compassion, integrity, the scholarship is theirs. But if they follow their mother's path, that door will close. I didn't say it to threaten. I wanted to set a clear boundary. Not everything is easily forgiven, but everyone has a chance to choose the right path. Reporters swarmed after I stepped down. Some praised my generosity, others questioned my motives. But in my heart, I didn't need everyone to understand. That night, I returned to the Hudson house. I brewed tea, stepped into the library, the one room Vivian never touched. My mother's old books and the smell of dry oak reminded me of winter nights when she read to me. I picked up her old diary, yellowed pages, slanted handwriting full of love. One passage stopped me. My dear daughter, if one day you must choose between revenge or moving forward, remember those who hurt you carry darkness. Don't let them root it in your heart forever. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's courage. I cried, not because I felt noble, but because I realized no matter the world's schemes, my parents' kindness was the most valuable legacy I could pass on. The next day, I sent a handwritten letter to Vivian's lawyer. No provocations, no threats, just one line. Justice has chosen its path. I won't pursue further if you stop here. 3 days later, Lily texted me. I don't know if I'm worthy, but I'll try to live up to what you said. Thank you. I didn't reply right away. I quietly saved the message in a folder labeled Hope. Have you ever forgiven without forgetting, or chosen kindness despite the chance to strike back? If you felt that, leave one word in the comments: choose. Because choosing forgiveness takes more strength than we imagine. I know this story isn't over. The darkness that once surrounded me still lingers. And as I feared a 3 a.m. anonymous text with a photo of me at the lawyer's office and a chilling line: play with fire, and you'll get burned. I stared at the phone, hands trembling slightly, but my eyes no longer looked away. I'd chosen this path. Now it was time to see it through. I never thought I'd agree to see her again. Vivian, the woman who made me feel stripped of everything: family, love, memories, even the right to grieve. But that morning, Caroline's phone buzzed with a quiet message. Vivian Cross requests a short meeting in the state prison's supervised room. You have the right to refuse. I almost dismissed it, but in the long silence of the days after the press conference, when everything seemed done, my mother's words from that old letter whispered back, forgive not because they deserve it, but because you need to move forward unburdened. I nodded. Caroline said nothing, just squeezed my shoulder. The prisoner meeting room was small, with thick glass dividing it, and old phones for talking. Unlike the movies, there were no tears, no shouting. Just a cold room with pale fluorescent lights and the hum of a fan. I sat first, trying to keep my hands steady. Minutes later, the iron door opened, and Vivian walked in. She wore an orange prison uniform, her hair tied back, now streaked with gray. Gone was the powerful woman with blood-red lips and a sharp, sweet voice. Before me was an aged, exhausted woman, but her eyes still held the sharpness that once chilled me. She didn't smile, didn't say hello. She sat across from me, picking up the phone. I lifted mine. Thank you for coming, she said, voice hoarse. I stayed silent. You probably think I want to ask for forgiveness. I didn't respond. We looked at each other, separated by glass and years of unresolved hatred. No, she continued. I'm not asking you to forgive. I don't think I deserve it. A pause. Then she lowered her head, hands clasped. I'm here for Lily. Her daughter's name hit me, pulling me back to memories of the little girl whose eyes always searched mine, as if asking, do you accept me? She's starting college soon, I said, voice softening. And I hope she won't become a copy of you. Vivian looked up, her tired eyes flickering with something not regret but perhaps remnants of love. I know. That's why I asked you here, she said. Lily has the best part of me. The part I let die when I chose power. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak forgiveness. I didn't need to. She sighed. I was wrong, she admitted. I did everything to hold on to a life that wasn't mine. And I hurt the one person who dared to seek the truth. Then she placed her hand on the glass. You can hate me. You can stay silent. But please don't let Lily become me. That was all. I didn't touch the glass. I looked at her for a few seconds, then set the phone down. No tears, no promises. But inside I knew I'd just closed a dark chapter of my life. That afternoon I went to the lawn outside the house. A gentle breeze blew. I called Lily. When she arrived, I handed her a cup of hot cocoa. I just saw your mom, I said. Lily sat beside me, clutching the cup. Is she okay? Prisoners are never okay. I said, smiling without bitterness. But she mentioned you. Lily didn't respond. After a moment, she said softly, I know. I don't want to hurt her, but I don't want to become her either. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Then you have one job, live kinder. Not to atone for anyone, but to save yourself. That night in the study, I opened Dad's journal again. The smudged ink, the clear words, Claire will know what's right, even if she's the last one believing in kindness. I smiled. I didn't forgive Vivian because she deserved it. I forgave because I didn't want my heart weighed down forever, and because Lily and Ethan deserved a chance to live free of the adult's shadows. People think endings are when things stop. But for me, it's when everything becomes clearer than ever. I returned to the Hudson house one early autumn afternoon, golden leaves covering the familiar path. It had been a home, then a battlefield. Now I wanted it to be a home again. The reading room was untouched since my last visit, only dustier with softer sunlight through the window. I opened the door, gently brushing each book, each drawer. When I touched a small wooden box under Mom's desk, my heart tightened. Inside was a sealed envelope. Faded ink, slightly yellowed paper, but the handwriting was unmistakable. To Claire, when you're old enough to understand. I sat in Dad's old leather chair, opened the letter and read, My dear, if you find this letter, you've likely gone through a journey I couldn't join. I'm sorry for leaving you to grow up without me, but I believe you'll become a kind person like your father and like you've always been. You'll face hurt, loss, and people who make you want to abandon trust. But don't let that darkness live in you forever. Forgiveness isn't surrender, Claire. It's freedom. Freedom from hatred, resentment, and burdens you don't need to carry forever. I folded the letter, holding it to my heart. Mom's words after all these years were like a stream seeping into the parched land of my soul. Dad's memorial was held in the backyard garden, where he'd planted small maples each fall. Ethan stood with me, no longer distant, but with eyes ready for a new chapter. Lily read a poem, her hands trembling, but her gaze steady. I didn't say much. I lit a candle before Dad's photo, whispering, I did it, Dad. Not just reclaiming the truth, but keeping the best of you. The Richard Thompson Scholarship Fund received over 200 applications in its first 2 months. We didn't just pick top students, but those who rose above adversity, living for others. A 16-year-old girl who lost her mother to cancer, baking online to support her sibling. A Haitian immigrant boy volunteering at a nursing home every weekend. Nathan and Lily were the first recipients and now advisory board members. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, me, Nathan, Lily, and a few fund colleagues, Ethan said, When I first met Claire, I thought she was here to tear this family apart, but in the end, she was the only one trying to keep it whole. I smiled lightly. I didn't keep everything. I just tried not to let the good be forgotten. Family, it turns out, isn't about blood. It's where we choose to forgive, where we choose to rebuild, where we don't abandon each other despite mistakes. If you've gone through loss but chose to live more beautifully, leave it in the comments. Because you like me know that legacy isn't in wealth, but in how we love, trust, and choose kindness. I don't know what the future holds. But I know I've walked this story to its end on my own feet, with the hands of those willing to hold mine. And Dad and Mom somewhere are probably smiling. I began this story with empty hands, a wordless loss, and a feeling of being erased from my own family. But in seeking justice for Dad, I found myself and realized the most precious thing isn't in the will, but in love, memories, forgiveness, and choosing to live kindly despite being hurt. My story isn't just about a hidden estate, but about what can't be locked away: honor, truth, and goodness. I learned to let go, not because the wrong deserved forgiveness, but because I deserve to live unburdened. If you've walked through darkness but chose to keep light in your heart, I hope you find resonance here. Don't forget to follow the channel to join me in more stories of human hearts loss and rebirth. And if this story touched you, leave a like below.